Hi, I'm Robin Wolfgram, owner and cake artist at The Cake Robin, a custom cakes, cookies, and baked goods business here in the Bay Area. Today, I'm here to show you how to make beautiful decorated sugar cookies for your friends and family. What better holiday gift than beautiful cookies decorated by you? All right, let's get baking cookies. All right, let's get started. Let's make some cookie dough. So you've got the recipe in your packet. Whenever I'm doing something, I'm going to read through the recipe first, make sure I understand all my ingredients, understand my instructions, and then I do what's called mise en place. So it's everything in its place in French, mise en place. So that means I weigh out, measure all my ingredients before I get started so I know I have everything. My butter, I put straight into my mixing bowl, since that's the first thing in the instructions. We're going to mix the butter and our sugars, so it saves me one bowl getting dirty. I have my flour to the side, I have my eggs to the side, so everything is also at room temperature. Also very important when you're doing most baking, everything should be at room temperature. I will set up my butter and eggs the night before, so I'm sure that they are at a cool room temperature and I'm not waiting an hour or two or three or four for them to come together to room temperature. If your butter or eggs are not at room temperature, your ingredients are not going to combine completely and you will not have a good, delicious cookie. So very important. Set out your butter and eggs the night before. Milk I will do the morning of. Butter, please do not soften it in your microwave. It's going to melt it. It's going to ruin the texture. Your cookie dough will not come together. A quick tip if you do need to warm up your eggs is you can put them still in their shell in a dish of warm water for 10-15 minutes, and that will help take the chill off of them and warm up your eggs. So let's get started. I have our butter already in our mixing bowl here, kind of just in big chunks, and it is soft at room temperature. What is room temperature butter? I'm going to take a piece of butter. I should be able to press it. My finger goes in, but not all the way through. That's what we are looking for. With our butter, we have brown sugar. We're going to add that in. And we have white sugar. We're going to add that in. I love this recipe because the brown sugar gives it a different characteristic than normal sugar cookies. Kind of like if you were making Nestle Toll House chocolate chip cookies, there's usually brown sugar and white sugar in that recipe. And that just adds extra flavor to this recipe. All right, so I've got my paddle attachment on. I'm gonna raise up my mixing bowl. And whenever a recipe says you need to cream your butter and sugar to well combine, that means at least 3 minutes, a good 3 to 4 minutes, maybe 5-6 minutes. So we're going to turn this on and give this a good mix. Starting on a lower speed until everything gets combined so I don't have sugar flying everywhere. Now we can increase the speed and let that go. And so you see it's still pretty chunky. It hasn't quite come together yet. We're going to let it go another couple minutes. Now you can see our sugar is much smoother. Our sugar and butter looks more like a homogeneous mix. I don't have chunks of butter surrounded by chunks of sugar. Put this down for a second, give a little scrape down. Never, ever, ever stick your spatula or spoon or finger into the mixer when it is running. That paddle or whisk or whatever you're using will catch that whisk, catch that spatula and throw it right back at you, and you do not want to do that. All right, so that looks a little better. Going to give it just another minute here. All right, so that's looking good. Normally I would do this for a few minutes longer, but we're gonna move ahead so we can get our cookie dough made. If you read the recipe, it does talk about using this and making it ahead of time, letting it rest overnight. I strongly suggest that. That is what we're going to do with this batch. So I'm going to move on to my wet ingredients. I've got 4 eggs. Break them into another container. Don't just break them into your bowl, because what happens if you get shell into your bowl of butter and sugar, or B, have a bad egg and you put them all in here. So always break your eggs into a separate container. And then I've got some vanilla bean paste. So we're gonna add our vanilla bean paste. Nice flavor. You can kind of see when I turn this back over, you can see the flecks from the inside of the vanilla bean pod. So vanilla bean paste is just that pod scraped with sugar. So you see that vanilla is in this cookie dough. We're gonna give this another mix till that's combined, so maybe 30 seconds. If we did this and our eggs were still cold, that butter would harden again and this would not incorporate nicely. All right, that is looking good. I know it may look like it's kind of curdled or broken, like it's not mixed together. That is perfectly normal at this stage. The fat in the egg and the water in the egg and the fat in the butter don't necessarily like to mix together right away, but as soon as we start to add our flour, you will see this all come together. The flour is going to bring the party together. So in this bowl, I have my flour. I do weigh everything here. The sugar and the flour, I weighed out. I have a little bit of salt. You always want salt in your baked goods. Even if the recipe doesn't call for it, throw in a pinch of salt. It just helps heighten all the flavors. It's not going to taste salty. So we've got our salt and our flour. And I'm going to put most of this in. All right, so that's probably about 2/3. I'll raise this back up. Very slowly. We're going to start this mixer so we don't have flour all over my kitchen. And let that start to combine. Give it a little baker's tap. Now I can go to the next speed. And then go one more. We're going to turn it off. So we just want to get that flour to start to combine in there. I'm going to add the rest of our flour now to this. And if you look at your recipe, I am using the lower range of flour since I am going to chill this overnight. That gives the flour ample time to rehydrate with the egg and the butter in there. So back up. Again, start it on the lowest speed on stir. Once I see my flour's kind of mixed, I can turn up the speed. We just want to mix till combined. We're not going for like a cake batter. We don't want a super heavy mix. That looks good. I don't see, what I'm looking for is, there isn't flour on the bottom. Oh, just a little bit. We're going to do a little bit more. So there's still a little flour. We don't want to overmix it because this is flour. Flour has gluten. If we overmix it, we activate the gluten and we're going to have tougher cookies. All right, perfect. So anytime you're making cake or cookies or brownies or pancake batter, waffle, anything with flour in it, you do not want to overmix because we do not want to make tough batter, dough. All right, come on off. And let's see what we have. So you should have a nice cohesive dough. It's not too sticky. If you have a stand mixer at home, these are made to stand on their heads. There you go. All right, let's get a bowl scraper. This is a bowl scraper, so I can scrape all my dough, make sure there's no flour sitting on the bottom, and that is beautiful cookie dough ready to go. I'm going to wrap this in probably 4 pieces and in plastic wrap and stick it in the fridge overnight. Now, one quick note about this recipe. If you notice, if you baked cookies before, there's no baking powder or baking soda. There is a reason for that. Baking powder or baking soda is a leavening agent, and that's to make our cookies puff up. If our cookies are puffy, like say a chocolate chip cookie, they are not going to be nice and flat for icing. Makes it much more difficult. So if you have your mom or grandma or great grandmother's or great aunt's cookie recipe for sugar cookies and you like it, all you need to do is just take that baking powder or baking soda out, use the recipe as is, You'll still have the same flavor, but you will have nice flat sugar cookies. You can also flavor this. We just put vanilla. You can do vanilla, almond extract, lemon, orange. Any extract flavors that you like are delicious in here. You could also add food coloring to this dough. You can color it solid. You can kind of marble it by just putting a little bit of color in and mixing it in. So you can really do a lot with this dough. You can have fun with it, play with it, make it your own, okay? Okay, so our dough has had a chance to rest overnight. Our icings have been resting overnight too. So now it is time to make our cookies. We're gonna roll out our dough. You can see I wrapped half of our dough up in plastic wrap after taking it out of the bowl. We're gonna unwrap it. I'm going to cut this in half because this is an awfully big piece of dough to roll. I may even do just a third. I wanna work with a third, a small portion at a time so it stays cool. I'm gonna take my handy bench scraper and cut a piece off. And then take my portion off. I'm gonna wrap this back up. I don't want it to dry out. We want it to stay cool. If it's a hot day in the summer, put this back into the refrigerator. I'm going to roll this piece of dough out. It's nice and soft. I let it sit out from the fridge for a few minutes so it's not too hard to roll. Sometimes the butter is super hard. It's really hard to roll out until you get it started. I like to roll out between two pieces of parchment. Parchment paper. It's not wax paper, it's not plastic wrap, it's not foil, it is parchment paper. Don't use wax paper, that waxy coating will ruin your cookies. So instead of using flour on your board, like most people do, that's how you learn to do it, this works much better. The more flour I add to this as I roll it out, the tougher the dough becomes because I keep adding more and more flour to it. It dries the dough out, so your last cookies that you cut out really don't taste very good. They taste mostly like raw flour because that's all that's left in them. So I'm just kind of flattening this out, put it in the middle of my parchment paper. I'm going to put another piece of parchment on top. I have a very large rolling pin here with handles on it. I also have one other trick up my sleeve. I have 2 dowel rods. These are 1/4 inch thick. They're square. I set them on each side of my parchment, and that's gonna be my guide, so I know my dough is 1/4 inch thick. It's even all the way through. It's perfect. You can buy these at hardware stores, really cheap. You can find on Amazon and cookie sites, they sell a really fancy version of these, but these are probably like $2 a piece. Best investment ever. So I take my rolling pin, I've got my dowels on the side, and I'm gonna start in the middle and roll towards one end, come back, roll towards the other end. It takes a minute to get it going. I'm going to take my top piece of parchment off. You can see it's kind of uneven at the ends because I'm rolling in the middle. I'm going to give this a turn. So then I will be sure that I roll those ends. And you can see why now I'm only using a piece of the dough, because if I had that whole piece, we wouldn't have enough parchment left. We would run out of room. So it's getting to the right thickness. I can almost feel it hitting the dowel rods. I'm going to stop again, give it one more turn, and take it off. You can see how we're doing. I can feel it. There's still a little bumpy in the middle. It's not quite one thickness yet. So we're going to put our dowel rods back on and come back. And that's also why we turn the dough, because when you're rolling, one way is going to be stronger for you to roll the dough than the other. So one side might be thicker and one side might be thinner, which is why having these guides is a wonderful thing. And they come in all different thicknesses. So if you wanted to do a 3/8 inch cookie, you could do that, but 1/4 inch is pretty standard. So I can feel my dough feels nice and even. We have a perfect 1/4 inch thickness, and now we are ready to cut out. So I have a couple of cute little holiday cookie cutters here. I'm gonna do a mitten. When I do batches of cookies, I try and do all the same size. So when I put them on the baking sheet, they're all going to bake evenly. I also like to cut out the same shapes at the same time so I can get them as close to each other as I can, like here. See, very little space in between those. So I don't have to re-roll my dough too many times. I love these sets like this. I have many of these sets in different shapes. So I have all different size stars. The fun thing with the stars, you can cut out each shape and you can make a Christmas tree with them. So very simply, Just keep cutting out as close to each other as I can get. If it comes out like that, no big deal. These little guys, I would bake totally separate. You can do a couple of the sizes of the stars together, but the bigger ones I would do separately from these little guys for sure. I love doing simple shapes for cookies. I have this round set. You can see all the different sizes from tiny 1 inch up to almost 4 inches. Very simple shape. They bake very easily. You can cut them out quickly. You can make these look like anything you want. You'll see when we get to decorating. They can be ornaments, they can be snowballs, they can be snowmen. All kinds of things you can do with the circles. And squares as well. I like the squares, which you'll see. I'm going to use the biggest size here. If I have room, we just have enough room to squeeze one out on this end here. I'm going to cut out that square. And I'm going to peel away the excess and just set it to the side for right now. Normally I would cut more out of that. We're not going to worry about that right this second. And because I didn't add flour, I can just combine this dough back together into a ball, re-roll it, and it will be just as good as these first ones we rolled out. This dough is getting a little soft, so you do want to keep your dough a little cold. I usually put my scraps in the fridge so they stay cold. Once our shapes are cut out, I then have a baking sheet, more parchment on top. It's non-stick. I don't need to grease this tray. I use this for anything I bake. Parchment on the tray, whether it's cookies, French fries, you name it. Helps cleaning up, and it's non-stick. So then I'm going to take my cookies, put them on top of here. Again, normally I would not put this little guy with these bigger cookies. What I like to do with this square, you will see I make some sticks that we're going to decorate into like a Santa, a tree, a snowman, do all kinds of things with them, or just do pretty decorations, strings of lights. So I'm going to use my bench scraper, has measurements, so I can kind of eyeball. Everybody knows what this is, pizza cutter, also great for cookies, cutting dough, cutting lots of different things. I'm going to make a mark at the top and the bottom, and I'm going to cut this into 4 strips. Roughly even, maybe 3. We're going to do 4. They're a little skinny, you might want to do 3. You'll see in the future. And then we can put those onto our baking sheet. Now, depending upon the size of our cookies, they're going to bake anywhere from 7 to 12 minutes. I'm going to start testing at 7 minutes. What we're looking for is slightly golden brown around the edges. They will continue cooking a little bit, called carryover cooking once they come out of the oven, so we don't want to over bake them. But we want to make sure they are done enough, because by putting the royal icing or cookie glaze on top, that does tend to absorb into the cookie, so it keeps it moist. So we do want to make sure they are definitely done. If they get a little more brown than you like, it's okay, because they're going to be covered with icing, and that's going to soften them up. So let's get these onto our tray, and then we will put these in the oven. Again, I'm going to go for probably 8 minutes. That little star is probably going to come off first, and the rest of these are going to go for another maybe 3 minutes and maybe 4 or 5 minutes on the 2 bigger cookies. So into a 350 oven, they will go.